Hello and welcome to the first podcast episode of Neekonomics. Since the first episode, we'll introduce ourselves. So we got two hosts for this podcast. Host number one, my name is Marwan Zebian, and host number two.
Dylan Wagner.
Now, before we jump right into it, should we just talk about a bit what Neekonomics is about? So I'll first say what we're going to do in Economics is basically bring economic knowledge out into the world. Because right now, it's not as accessible unless you study it as an A level. We'll be talking about economic ideas, current events, we'll be talking about history, and then what else we'll be discussing? Stuff like books and stuff?
Of course.
Of course. So we're gonna really cover the range and also challenge classroom thinking. Give some new ideas and views of stuff you learn. But should we jump right into it? So Dylan, should we tell the audience what our first podcast episode is about?
Well, for a simple light breeze, we are giving a short introduction to behavioral economics as a whole. Take the stage, Marwan.
Oh yeah. So let's hit the ground running. So we're gonna start with default choice. Now, wait, Dylan, what is default choice?
Well, default choice is the human tendency to stick with the first option that they have.
Thank you very much. And now, to portray the idea of default choice, I'm gonna ask you a question, Dylan.
Yeah.
If you were to die right now, would you decide to donate your organs or not?
No.
No. Well, I would, and that brings about an interesting question, which is organ donation after death. Now, this links to default choice because in the UK 2020, the system got changed to an opt-in system to an opt-out system. Yeah. Now, probably not aware what this is, so we're going to demonstrate, and this shows how governments can use behavioral economics to set out policies. So the original opt-in system worked like this. Dylan, do you want to donate your organs when you die?
No.
So that's the opt-in system. Dylan has to opt in to donating his organs. But now the opt-out system, which is what we changed to in 2020, works like this. Dylan, you're gonna donate your organs after you die. Would you like to opt out of this situation?
Yes.
And now this tiny change may seem like, oh, even if someone doesn't want to donate, they opt out. But actually, there's a way higher rate of people donating their organs simply because the idea of default choice. And these choices like we make in society do matter a lot, not just to like our own like lifestyles, but also economic activity, such as organ donation. But now we're going to move on to the next topic. Dylan, what are we going to be talking about next?
Let's let's discuss some framing.
Framing. That's a good topic. Now, framing is basically the way like information is presented. Because Dylan, I've heard you're a bit of a yogurt man yourself.
Facts.
So, what kind of yogurt do you like to get?
0% fat.
0% fat. Well, 0% fat, there's only one way to frame that. But let's talk about like 50% fat free. If I gave you two pots of yogurt and one said 50% fat and the other one said 50% fat free, which one are you going to choose?
50% fat free.
And that shows the idea of framing. Companies frame their products in a way so they seem more appealing because it's nicer to see 50% fat free than something saying like 50% fat. Now, Dylan, what's another example of this that we see in supermarkets?
Well, these examples are present all around us in the supermarkets. One way we can see it is with Heinz ketchup. As normally it has 100% sugar, but instead of saying 20% sugar, they'll say 80% sugar free. So it looks like a bigger number, so everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm getting less sugar.
Exactly, and it's not just supermarkets, it goes all the way from policy framing, the way governments portray the policies to the public. Let's go on to our next topic. Now that we're talking about framing and lifestyle decisions, let's go a bit about identity because behavioral economics. Well, let's move on to our next topic because framing and default choice talks about the choices you make, which is kind of like the person you are, which goes on to identity, social behaviors, interactions. Well, identity comprised of not only like the clothes you wear, if you're LGBTQ plus, sexuality. Don't know what else is it comprised of.
Skin color,
Anything else?
religion.
Age, beliefs.
Oh, I've got another one. Disabilities.
Yeah, including that. So there's so many stuff that comprises of identities, which is why it's important to understand how to move around these because it is natural for us to aggregate into groups. This is called echo chambers. Do you know what echo chambers are, Dylan?
I do not. Please explain.
Well, echo chambers is basically when people tend to like join groups with people with their own opinions, own like beliefs, which means you may think, oh, that's harmful. But if me and you, Dylan, were in a group, and let's say we love strawberry ice cream, we're never gonna hear why strawberry ice cream is bad, why maybe chocolate is better.
Mm.
So we're just gonna always love strawberry ice cream. Now this is a fine example, but when it comes to stuff like politics and what party you should vote for, if you're in an echo chamber and you're a conservative, you're never gonna hear why Labour is good as well. Which means your political voting and ideas may not be up to date or correct, which can be very detrimental to economic activity. Now, should we talk about a specific case study, Dylan?
We should.
Now, which case study do you have lined up for us?
Some Bangladeshi women. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, women in Bangladesh. Now, this is an example of how identity and social interactions come into play. Because let's first talk about the women. Okay, now, in the past there have been lots of stereotypes about women, which these preconceived stereotypes people may have, especially in India, where there is very high gender inequality, and there was when this case study was done. So, Dylan, what kind of stereotypes do you think there would be preconceived which are not true at all?
Obviously, these are not true, but as we know, there have been very bad stereotypes, and like in countries like Saudi Arabia, we see lots of anti-feminism, as people, for some weird reason, believe like, oh, women, they should be cleaning, not working, they're not hardworking, they should be in the kitchen, like that kind of horrible stuff, which can really fuck up the woman's mind.
Well, I didn't know you were such a feminist, Dylan. But not only are we going to talk about like also the behavioural and like discrimination and like emotional side of like discrimination, especially sexism, is very bad. But economic activity, this is where Bangladeshi women come into play. Because we have a bunch of line managers, and half of them are men, half of them are women. And what people saw with the men line managers was that when they managed the line, it was just normal management, obviously like bit if here, problem there. But when it came to women, because the workers had this preconceived belief that the women were not as capable as men, they refused to listen to the women. And what did that lead to?
Well, this obviously led to women producing less because they didn't believe in themselves.
That's actually what I was not referencing to.
Ah.
But no. But it was the people not believing in the woman. But that's actually a very good point because the lines became worse because not only did the workers not believe in the woman, which means the line management was worse, which means it built up these beliefs because it was the women managing these lines, and now people are seeing the line, they're like, she's not managing it correctly, but it was actually the workers' beliefs. But actually, someone's preconceived belief about themselves is also as effective. Now, maybe not in this case study, but Dylan's just touched a very good point, which leads us to our next case study, which is where people are asked questions about themselves and it changes their activity.
Oh,
So, what case study is that?
let's see some Swiss bankers.
Swiss bankers. Now, before we get into this, Dylan, what's your opinion of bankers? Do you think they're cheaters? They just want to take your money. You know how people usually say bankers, they just love money. What do you think?
I think the bankers are on a respectable grind. They are clearly making money, which is impressive as that is mostly what people want in this world. May seem selfish, but at the same time it's also very respectable that they're just trying to climb to the top.
Fair enough, Dylan. I like that view on bankers you have. And now we're going to move to the bankers in Zurich. Now, the University of Zurich did a study. They got a bunch of bankers together, only bankers, by the way, and they were told to flip a coin 10 times. And out of the 10 times, if they got more heads than a threshold number, which was I think 6 or 7, then for every extra head they had, they got 20. They were offered 20 Swiss francs, and now you may think someone must be watching to cheat for them cheating, right? But Dylan, do you want to tell them the little circumstance which gave them the high incentive for cheating?
It was actually about the questions they were asked before.
Exactly. Since they were not supervised, they also had a high incentive for cheating, and the questions they were asked before somehow increased their want to cheat. Now you're thinking, how's that going to happen? Well, they were asked 2 questions. One half was asked one question, the other was asked another. And we're going to give a little, Dylan, should we do like a little role play, show them what the questions were? So this was question 1 that was asked to half of the people, half the bankers. What's your favourite lifestyle activity, Dylan? What do you do in your leisure time?
I played golf.
Golf? You're a golf man? I did not know. Now, that's what half of them had to ask. And when they were asked this question, the people who were asked this question had a 6% cheating rate. Which is like, it's like, it's average. Because no one was watching them, so they would just tell them they got an extra head or two. And then they would got the money, obviously. Like, they were offered the money, but they were known to be cheating because they were a higher level than calculated by statistics. But now let me ask you the question the other half received. Dylan, what are your values as a banker?
Money.
So ominous. I'm sure half of them had those correct answers too. But when people were asked about their values of bankers, cheating rates increased to 16%.
Oh my god.
Yeah, 16%. That's a 10% increase just because of the question they were asked before. And now that shows, as if when they were asked about this question, their mind was thinking about something else. It was almost as if another moral personality came into play. Just because they were thinking of themselves as bankers, they cheated 10% more, which is really quite a big increase. And before we end this and go on to finishing this podcast, because it is a quick episode, do you want to hear one little like fun tiny thing that also happened that showed this?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're at an auction, and before the auction, all the people were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number. Now, for those people whose social security number was higher than 80, had a way higher rate of spending more money on items than those people whose last 2 numbers of social security number were like 20 or less. You know what I mean? So let's say my social security number ended in 89. I had a higher rate of actually spending more money versus someone who wrote down like 18. They spent less money in the auctions. So that just shows how how even questions you ask people can affect their activity. Well, I think this comes probably to a close of the podcast, don't you think? The episode. So Dylan, do you want to quickly tell them what we're going to be talking about next time?
Next time we will take a debrief and a slide into our views on the Trump tariffs.
Trump tariffs, yep. And we'll be talking about Trump tariffs in the next episode. We didn't want to start it off because that's probably like a basic topic. So we wanted to give like a little behavioural. And the good thing about economics is it's a wide topic. It goes into sociology, maths, politics, history. So we really have a lot to talk about. And I think that ends our episode. So if anyone wants us to talk about anything specific, please tell us. Tell us any books you've read, anything you've learned in the classroom that we can discuss and give different views on. Maybe something they don't teach, like the opposite side. We could give it to them. And thank you for watching the first episode of Neekonomics. My name is Marwan, and Dylan.
Thank you very much. We hope to see you watch again.